We're live. Welcome to
All
Peanuts
right.
from the Plebs.
Hello, welcome everyone.
Good morning.
Where do we start?
Where do we start?
Well, we
What?
were just chatting,
Yeah. I,
so we can continue
I mean,
when we.
the most recent thing on my head is we can continue what we were talking about with the Alex Morse
Yeah, well,
situation.
the two races in Massachusetts have been getting a lot of national coverage. One is the one Alex Morse you just mentioned, Jim, in District 1 of central western Massachusetts. He is challenging the seat held basically forever by Richie Neal, who's the head of the Ways and Means Committee. So a very powerful congressperson. However, apparently has not really, is a totally entrenched corporate Democrat and not very progressive on a lot of issues. And Alex Morse is challenging him. Alex Morse was endorsed by, I think we covered this last week, but he was endorsed by a lot of progressives. And then there was this issue of his, the smear that came out against him. And apparently it looks like it's backfiring against Richie Neal. The other race that's going on is a Senate race in Massachusetts where Ed Markey, long-term, quote unquote, progressive Democrat who basically sponsored the Green New Deal and I believe Medicare for All, is being challenged by Kennedy because he's a Kennedy, basically on his
Also,
name.
all his rhetoric is perfect. Kennedy keeps talking about, I was the one who protected the Affordable Care Act from the attacks, right? So he's all, the Affordable Care Act is the answer to our healthcare dreams.
Right. And there's
right in line, yeah.
Some unions have apparently endorsed Kennedy, but Kennedy is a more conservative candidate. And it's interesting that the Democratic Party, I believe it was last year, came out and said we will not support any challengers to incumbents, and we will basically blacklist anybody.
Yeah. Asterisk Tulsi Gabbard, of course, because
right, anybody who challenges an incumbent will be blacklisted, or anybody who works for them will be blacklisted. So any of this part of that machine, fundraising or whatever they do, will be blacklisted. But now it appears there's a double standard. So if you are challenging from the right, that's okay. So Kennedy has actually been endorsed by the Democratic Party as a challenger to Markey, I believe. And Pelosi has supported. I think Pelosi came out in favor of
Joe Kennedy's
challenge to Ed Markey, which was, even though that's a Senate race, but I mean, that was interesting that there's a double standard, and AOC, to her credit, said there's a double standard in the party. So we need to address that. She didn't mention Nancy Pelosi by name, but I think it was pretty clear that that's whom it was directed at.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But there's more people in the race for the Senate seat than just, and also for all the rep seats are up. So I was actually looking into this the other day, and also ranked choice voting is going to be on the ballot in November. So that's something. Yes on two. Just putting it out there right now. But there's I think there's two independents that are running, and there's also two Republicans. And Dr. Shiva, you remember the guy that he was out when we were out doing our Tulsi stuff? He's running as a Republican. But I think their primary, I think is September 1st. And then from there, obviously, is
right. But realistically, I mean, who's actually going to win that seat is probably going to be Markey or Kennedy.
Dude,
in terms of
I have to watch another Joe Kennedy
freaking
I'm going to go nuts, dude. Like, I got to the point where I'm like, I want him to lose simply because he's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
It's every single ad, no lie. Like, I've been watching YouTube, and every single ad is Joe Kennedy.
For a while, I had Schumer popping up in my face, talking about needing money for a while. But now it's like Kennedy all the time. Yeah.
I mean, I know
it's overplay.
Yeah.
Markey has his limitations, but Kennedy's not. There's no. It's just I'm a Kennedy. Vote for me. There's really no. Except he's a little bit to the right. He's a little bit more conservative, so he's appealing to like the older electorate, apparently, right?
Yeah, but he has strategically placed himself, said all the right things to signal to the corporate Dems that I'm your guy, I will play ball. Like I said, talking about protecting the historic Affordable Care Act from attacks by the right and all this kind of stuff. He's saying everything perfect to get them.
And I think the fact that AOC is in these ads with Markey, and has endorsed Markey, is kind of a lateral move against AOC too.
Oh, could be, yeah.
Well, but I think him signing on to the whole Green New Deal thing, that was obviously very strategic for him to set this up so that come this election, he could go and say, oh, look, but I've been for all this, how are you going to, and I think one of the ads for Markey is like, I don't know who it is, but I think it's the Boston Globe has called Ed Markey a progressive that needs to be elected back,
the Globe, yeah.
Because I care about what the fucking Boston Globe tells me.
Yeah, the Warren pusher from forever, absolutely. Yeah. We have to rewind really quickly though and address Morse a little more. It's not just that his opponent got caught; the entire Dem leadership got caught in that. They were all wrapped up in that, and they've got was it emails or something that basically where they were coaching these people to make these accusations. I mean, they're caught red-handed. Right. When I went to this Moving for People's Party standout, there were like Bernie Dems there and stuff like that, and they're pushing to get these people. But of course, justice isn't going to actually happen. But
did you see any of the debate between Richie Neal and Alex Morse? And Richie Neal is really trying to say, my hands are clean. I'm not involved with this at all. But it seems like it is definitely backfiring against him because Alex Morse has gotten a lot of notoriety that he wouldn't have gotten otherwise because of this whole thing. And I think people are wising up. It'll be interesting to me to see, if Kennedy wins the primary because of all this advertising or whatever. No. I don't think it's because of any ideology. So is that kind of advertising and the personality politics, is that still effective now or is it less effective? Are people, like the whole thing with Alex Morse, people are trying to cancel him because he was like, going on dates with his students and abusing his power and all this bullshit, right? So, I think people are more aware of it. The question is it enough to defeat like Richie Neal and a comment like Richie Neal?
Well, when you're talking about we're talking about like Northampton and Holyoke, right?
And Springfield
that are generally extremely left in their politics, a lot of them, right? I mean, obviously Northampton, right?
Well,
and really favoring gay rights and all that. They should see this as a personal attack on a man using his queerness, his gayness as a weapon.
I think Northampton will really
I would
go
think
for Morris. Yeah, but in terms of the numbers, it's a large, like Holyoke is about half Hispanic. I mean, it's a very and Alex Morse really he ran for city council when he was 21, when he was in college basically, and got elected. And he basically has done a grassroots campaign all the way, going door to door, speaking to the issues that affect people, and not saying I'm a powerful, reelect me because I'm in the Ways and Means Committee. I have all this power in Congress. But basically said it, and not really address the concerns of everyday people. And I think Alex Morris has done that, and I think it's partly at Northampton that left rich college educated constituency, but also it's going to be the Hispanic people in Springfield and Holyoke. I think we'll
But
we'll
I think the
support it
problem
as
is
well.
that because all of this gossip and just scandalous, salacious stories that are going around, it's taking the focus away from. I mean, I'm not hearing anything about anyone's platforms. Like, I'm not, no one's talking about that. They're just talking about this. I mean, maybe in the debate they were
Yeah.
talking. I would
Well,
hope that they were talking more about that. But I mean, I don't know that anything like, be Alex Morse being a progressive. I don't even know that he's a progressive, because no one that I know of, people are not talking about that.
I mean, there's a picture of him like on his, I don't know if it's on Facebook or on his website where, with him with Hillary Clinton or whatever. So he is, he has he's been associating with, corporate Democrats, but he's much more progressive in terms of his platform than Richie Neal is. He's for marijuana legalization. He's for Medicare for all. He's for. I mean, Richie Neal he supported the Hyde Amendment. He's ambivalent on abortion. Alex Morris is much more to the left. If you listen to the interview that Useful Idiots did the last week, with Matt Taibbi and Katie Halper, they interviewed Alex Morris, and he really goes into some detail about his program, and he really comes across well. Whether that translates into an election victory and people are aware of that and will support it because of that, I think he represents much more what people on the ground think and support.
But I do agree with Daisy that it's unfortunate that falls by the wayside good discussion of these progressive ideas, except for the fact that I like to think of anti-corruption as being a progressive value, right? And this plays right by the book of corporate warmonger person versus progressive, where
right.
The reason that this person was motivated to smear out Morse was that he could get a job from
Right.
from the other guy. So it's like that, that's right in line with what you expect. This guy that's handing out favors, using his power, in a illegal or immoral way, just to sustain his own power for power's sake.
Right. I mean, it is totally corrupt. And I think the argument is like, you got to reelect Richie Neal because he's been in Congress for 30 some odd years and he's the head of the Ways and Means Committee. And if we have a freshman congressman, elected, then we're going to lose all that status and power that Massachusetts has, so it's kind of condoning and supporting that corruption, saying, well, we have to utilize it, for our state, whatever. Therefore, we have to support this.
Sure, that would have been the argument for AOC's opponent. What was his name? Joe. What was his name? Joe. I can't remember the name. The one that was basically in line to take over for Pelosi. Well.
Right.
Anyways.
I have a Moscow Minute that would kind of segue from this. I was going to talk about. So you've all heard about Andrei Navalny?
No.
Okay.
No, educate me.
Andrei Navalny is Navalny. He is a challenger to Putin in Russia, and he recently was apparently poisoned. He was on a flight from, I believe, Tomsk, and he had drunk some tea at the airport, and soon after they took off in the flight, he started experiencing these really bad, painful symptoms, and they had to land the plane in Omsk, another Russian city, and he was hospitalized, and they tried to get him, the Germans tried to help him get out of there so he could get treatment in Germany, and the doctor said he can't. They were very open to it, and all of a sudden they closed down and said he couldn't be transported, and the theory is that maybe they were waiting for the signs of any poison to disappear, which takes about 3 days. But anyways, he just left for Berlin yesterday, so now he's in Berlin receiving medical care. But apparently this, whether he survives or not is an open question. But Navalny is somebody who is is an anti-corruption activist in Russia, because in Russia there's a lot of corruption, just like there is here. And it's a little bit different kind of corruption. It's kind of like a more centralized I wouldn't say mafia quite, but I mean, there's quite a history in Russia of poisonings. I mean, for the Litvinenko case in London with the plutonium, and there's a case with the Skripal poisoning as well. Are you shaking your head? Okay, it's just in Russian culture, there's a history of poisoning. He
It's just something we do, you know.
It's just, but anyways, he is interesting. Navalny's an interesting case because he's an anti-corruption activist. He ran for mayor of Moscow in 2013 or 2012, I believe, and he was one of the top vote getters, but he was defeated narrowly by the approved candidate. But he claimed there was corruption in the election, whatever. And so he is a challenger to the system, and then he got, he had this, and it may just be okay. They're saying, well, maybe it was just cirrhosis he had or something. It wasn't necessarily poisoning, but it seems like there was something going on. But he's also, interestingly, he's a Russian nationalist too. So he believes Ukraine and Belarusia and Russia should all be like one unified cultural entity and political entity. And he has said kind of racist things about the Georgians on their southern frontier, that they're basically vermin and they should be, they should just
that's where Jim draws the line, is racism.
Well, okay, I'm just saying this guy is not all I think the West probably supports this guy, but he's a Russian nationalist too. So he's even more of a Russian nationalist than Putin. He's criticized Putin for saying, we should not tolerate Ukraine being separate from Russia, and we should fight against the West. But I thought it was interesting that where does he fit into the picture? Because he's an anti-corruption activist, just like Alex Morris is in his own way. But he's also a nationalist, so he doesn't necessarily align with Western, neoconservative strategic goals.
Except that he's anti-Putin, so I've got multiple tweets.
Right, exactly.
Multiple tweets by Hillary here saying, "Oh, good, he's going to go to Germany for treatment. Oh, that nasty Putin, he poisoned him, and yeah."
I don't know if you follow Russian politics at all, but
God no.
Putin's assistant is Dmitry Peskov, and this guy is he's the worst. He's just like, they're very sexist, and they're very they're always obviously trying to make excuses for everything. So like he'll say like, well, he probably had cirrhosis, which doesn't really align with what actually happened.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting because they were going to let him out of this hospital, Navalny, and then all of a sudden the doctors like everything like the order came down from above, and they said, well, we can't let him go. He's not safe to fly. He can't fly safely, and we have to keep him here. And then after 3 days, they said, okay, he can go now.
It's like all the cameras weren't working, and the guards were eating pizza, and this guy that was on suicide watch managed to hang himself with a bed sheet.
I mean, there was
that.
There was another opponent. Another opponent to the Kremlin who was murdered in Moscow. This was about 3 or 4 years ago on a bridge right near the Kremlin, and the cameras they were supposed to be operating didn't work during that. So we don't have a monopoly on this kind of stuff. So there's a history in Russia. I mean, the journalists get murdered. I think journalists get mistreated here, if not murdered. I mean, look at the Michael Hastings case here. It was never proved that he was murdered, but you know who Michael Hastings is. He used to be on the Young Turks.
Oh, yes.
He was the guy who exposed Stanley McChrystal and got Stanley McChrystal fired. And then within a couple of years, he was dead. And he was driving his car in Hollywood or whatever, and lost control of it. And he was going like, everyone said he drove like your grandmother, typically. But this guy, all of a sudden, he's doing like 80 miles an hour down a busy street and crashes, and the engine goes flying. And it didn't make any sense. Like it looked like it was a setup.
Well, it was like the 40-year-old lawyer for the DNC lawsuit drop dead, right? I mean,
right. So I mean, so we're not. I'm just saying this. Wherever you have entrenched power, and whenever you have corruption, and that combination, that's when people are going to resort to anything to maintain that,
right.
and they're not going to shy away from murder.
Right. And
so what I mean, I don't,
yeah.
I think it's interesting that this guy in Russia is actually to the right of Putin in terms of nationalism, because Putin's kind of like, well, we can work with the West, we can have independent Ukraine and white Russia and whatever, and this guy is more of a nationalist than Putin himself.
But I mean, didn't Putin just win recently and by a large margin?
Yeah.
So he obviously has the support of the people. So I don't understand how.
Well, it's not obvious because the elections. I mean, who knows how trustworthy elections are?
So how do
Of
Russians?
Of course, we're not going to take the. I mean, even though they voted on not just him, but they also voted on all these amendments to their constitution or whatever. But
right, basically giving Putin
but
power.
But none of that matters. It's just the fact that obviously whoever voted for Putin then definitely.
I mean, he's a populist. He has a lot of support in Russia. I mean, people. Generally, the person on the street is going to say, he's great because he's made Russia great again. He's helped Russia stand up against the West, right? And I give him credit for that. I think that, but I also think, how many women do you see in the leadership in Russia, right? I mean,
but you see, the thing is that we always try to hold people to our standard of living, and I don't think that that's fair. I think that every country has its own culture. They have their own ways of doing things, and I think that what they feel is appropriate. I think that the way that the people actually went out and voted on all of these amendments and all that, they spoke and they said how they want their country to be run and and their culture to be adhered to. You know what I'm saying? And it's not for us to come in and say, well, because they don't have enough women in their legislature, then
I'm not saying it's for us to come in and do that.
I'm just giving my opinion. You're giving your opinion. I'm giving my opinion.
In fact, I think if the West goes in and tries to support these opposition candidates, it's gonna vitiate the situation. It's going to make it worse because then they can say, oh, look, the West is supporting these candidates, right? It's better to just have a hands-off approach. Let these opposition figures do what they're going to do, but we should, Western power should not be involved, because then obviously it becomes subject to the accusation that you're just trying to pursue your own agenda, right? But in Russia, I mean, it's a fact that Putin is from St. Petersburg. Most of his associates are from St. Petersburg. Is from that group, and that's just a fact. And it's a fact that political murder is fairly common in Russia, and there's a lot of corruption. That's a fact. There's a lot of power, a lot of economic power is consolidated at the top, near the top, and also there's not a lot of their economy is basically mostly based on natural resources, natural gas, oil, coal, gold, whatever they have, but they're not, as far as manufacturing everything, they are behind South Korea. I mean, for a country with 11 time zones, they're not the economic powerhouse that they could be. But that being said, I just think it's interesting. It's always interesting to see what's going on in a kind of a parallel universe in Russia. I'm not saying we should support this guy or not support Navalny. I'm speaking of just let's look at what's going on there. And yes, it is different. They have a different culture, and some of it's, we may consider it bad, we may consider it good, and it's different. They look at Putin, looks at us and says, you don't have democracy, and he's right. Like, you have the Electoral College selecting your president, and you have, your majority of people supposedly voted for one candidate and the other candidate wins. Like he said, you don't have democracy, and you have all this corruption in elections too, election fraud.
Right.
And he's right about that.
When you were describing Russia, like all these issues in Russia, it's like, right, but these are all issues that we have too. The whole corruption and like power being at the top, and it's just in different hands. So instead of being in the hands of these oligarchs, these Russian oligarchs really over on our end. It is these oligarchs, right? But it's these corporations essentially that are at the helm of everything.
I mean, I think the U.S. has more of a tradition of political freedom. So, like, if you go out and demonstrate, like Jim, you did this week, you go out to Suffolk Downs and hold signs and stuff, you can do that. In Russia, it's a little bit more complicated. If you don't get a permit, chances are you will get shut down. It's just the way it is. It's the culture, and people support that. People, they're much more law and order minded over there, so they feel like there's an order, and you can't, and society needs this order to operate, and you can't disrupt this order. And
which is also an Asian thing, right? Because Asian, and I hate generalizing like that, but it is more of a cultural thing and that's why supposedly in Asia with this whole thing with the pandemic that they were able to handle things differently because there is like this social like a social thread.
People are more
feels connected.
People are more compliant.
A responsibility or whatever.
Like they'll be willing to work, to do whatever they need to do, and even if it means sacrificing, quote unquote personal freedom. Like if I have to wear a mask, it's not a personal freedom issue. It's like my obligation to society, right?
Exactly.
And you have to remember Russian history. They were the Mongols invaded like in whenever it was the 1300s, or no, before that. They were under Mongol domination for like 500 years. And that's why they developed this very, they made a Kremlin in each city, which is a fortress, to defend against these Mongol invaders. But they also intermarried with them a lot. It took a lot of the culture from the Mongols. So there is an Asiatic influence in Russian culture. And they do. I mean, if you go over there, people are much more like, you can't, like here, somebody will throw litter or something on the street. If you do something like that there, or if you walk, across the street when the light is red, some old babushka is going to grab you and say, you can't do that stuff. Who do you think you are? And here it's a different
well, here
mindset.
That granny, that little babushka better mind her own business.
Right. But there, it's very much, people aren't shy about telling you what you should do.
I'll cross the street where I want to.
And that's good and bad. It's good and bad because they have, like, you go over there and the streets, the cities are very clean. People are, basically mind your own business.
Different. It's a different society.
It's different
not
society.
The same, right.
Different.
I think
that
jaywalking thing is a Boston versus the rest of the world kind of thing to myself. You go to other cities and they look at you kind of weird when you just like cross where you want.
Well, I know, like in Germany, you stand there. Everyone, if there's no cars in sight and the light's red, people will just stand there and they'll wait till the light turns green. And then they
it's
cross.
just like in Germany, how public transportation is essentially, it's the honor system. I mean, obviously they do have people that go and check sporadically, but essentially they expect for you to pay your toll and and do the right thing. But
I was there for 9 days.
No one's gonna tell you, hey, you didn't pay this.
No one's gonna check you. And that would never work here. That would never fly here because everybody would just
be like, fuck it.
Fuck the system, right?
I think it was the same in Copenhagen. I think I remember just kind of going like, well, how do they know I'm on this platform, but how do they know I paid? It was that kind of thing. There was no gate where you had to check your,
So anyway, so kind of wrap it up with this thing. I'm interested in how the Western press covers this Navalny case because he fits into the narrative because he's anti-Putin, but he's also a Russian nationalist, even more than Putin is. So they may, they have to worry about what they wish for because if Navalny actually took over, he could be worse than Putin. So
the media having to watch out what they wish for? No, really?
Well, I'm interested in how they portray the story because I think they're a little ambivalent. If Navalny, like if he was like Garry Kasparov, the chess player, who was another political figure in Russia, and he's very like Western. He wants to have like capitalism, and he wants to he's basically exactly who the neocons and neoliberals would want to have running Russia. Whereas Navalny is kind of a more ambivalent figure.
I guarantee that you have more knowledge about Russia than anyone CNN or MSNBC is going to have on to talk about this guy. And they're just going to be, Hillary says this guy's anti-Putin, so we got to talk about this poisoning and how bad Putin is. You know?
Well, I don't even know that much, but it doesn't take. I mean, if you read a little bit, you can learn a lot pretty quickly. And it's just I always think the parallels are interesting.
Well, but that also depends on who you read, right?
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, Russia to me is always interesting because it's kind of like a parallel world.
Sure.
We have the Wild West, they have the Wild East. You know, they have their society. We moved westward, they moved eastward, and the way they treated their minorities was a lot different than the way we treated our minority or our indigenous peoples. So there are a lot of parallels in terms of, like, you know, we're continental empires basically. We're North America. They are Europe. A lot of Europe and a lot of Asia. So there's parallels, and I think it's always elucidating to see what's going on over there versus what's going on over here. Not there are differences and everything, but that's my Moscow minute. I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Minute.
Jesus.
What do you think, Casey?
Minute.
Minute asterisk.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, have you guys heard about the story about Millie Weaver? So, because I haven't seen it on indie media, and I think it's actually kind of interesting. So Millie Weaver, she is a journalist for InfoWars, and she recently got arrested on a grand jury indictment. Like, that sounds like some serious shit, you know? And it was, you know, the big controversy about it is that she was arrested on the same day that her documentary was supposed to come out, and the documentary is called Shadowgate, right? And it's supposed to talk about, expose the deep state, how it's, you know, meddling in our politics, and it's based off of, I guess she has 2 whistleblowers, and I haven't personally seen it, but it was released a few hours after she was arrested. And so originally what people were speculating was that she was arrested because for burglary, right? So charges of burglary, but they thought that that it was because she had stolen government papers, right, for her documentary. But then it turned out that it's regarding some assault on her mom. So in April, Millie Weaver, her brother, and her boyfriend or husband, I don't know if maybe at the time that was her boyfriend or whatever, but they were verbally assaulting the mom, right? And the mom started recording what was going on. And they saw that she was recording this, and they pinned her down to the ground. They threw her down to the ground, pinned her down, and stole her phone. And so then she ran away and she called the cops. And so from this, now in August, they're coming after her with a grand jury indictment.
Right.
For burglary.
Yeah. Right.
So it seems like it's a little excessive, and even the mom has come out, and the mom dropped the charges. She didn't want to continue, but the prosecutor said, I guess in the state of Ohio, you don't have, they can continue on even if they don't have the support of the witness or whatever,
right,
or of the victim, they can continue on with the case.
Right.
And so and then, you know, the other part, when she was first arrested, they were saying that it was just all for show, so that, you know, she could get publicity for the documentary. But I don't know. So and then a lot of people were obviously talking about how this is, you know, like, it's kind of like what happened with Julian Assange, right? But you cannot compare the two, obviously, because Assange, he was, I mean, technically they're both supposedly revealing or exposing government secrets, right? But I mean, what they've done to Assange compared to her, I mean, yes, they arrested her on a Friday so that she would be in jail all weekend, you know what I'm saying? And they wouldn't be able to see the judge until Monday. So, but you cannot compare that to the torture that Julian Assange has been under for how many years now? I think like 7 years, right? I mean,
but it's important if they get away with these little
Right.
things. I mean, and again, I don't like Trump, but you didn't need an army to arrest Roger Stone, you know, a 70-year-old guy and his deaf 70-year-old wife in a pre-dawn raid with, you know, assault weapons and, and
Right.
gunboats and helicopters.
Right.
You know, that you know, people ought to be outraged no matter what side that happens to, when they totally blow through the normal procedures just to send a message or whatever.
Well, the commonality here is that with Roger Stone, with Molly Weaver, and with Assange, is that they're all, you know, to some or lesser degree, they are journalists or investigators or people dealing with uncovering information about
Right.
our leadership or the government. And so that's what ties it all together. And the fact that they're going after these people just for like looking for something that'll stick, you know, like the federal, the judicial part, you know, whoever, somebody said we could convict a ham sandwich if we had to. So they can always find something to get you on. And Assange, it was like these, you know, these supposed rape charges that were dropped, right? And with
It's
you know, whatever, they'll
setting.
find something that's totally normally would probably be thrown out of court or whatever. It wouldn't go very far, and they'll use that as a lever to go after these people. So the real crime, as far as they're concerned, is you're exposing corruption, or you're exposing, and it just like Russia, right?
Yeah, the overkill also sends a message to anyone else that would potentially do it. It's like
it sends a message,
Exactly.
right?
Tulsi will tell you that they know, of course, she's not a Russian asset, but this constant going after her is basically sends a message to anyone else that'll step out of line. That will basically call out the military-industrial complex that we will do this to you. And yes, it's beyond all reason, and that's the point, you know, that we can make everyone fall in line and attack you.
Right.
Exactly.
Well,
and I think it's very important. The people that they choose to do this to is always really important, right? They did it to Assange, right? Because it was easy to target him after the whole thing of 2016, because he was the bad guy at that time. So you don't care about, you know, doing that to Assange because he's the bad guy now, right? Exactly the same thing with Alex Jones. You know, like, oh, he's some crazy kook, you know, of course you want to go after people like that. And obviously with Millie Weaver, the fact that she's from InfoWars, I feel like that's a big reason why a lot of people are not talking about it, even though I think that this is something really, because it really is, to me, or at least to a good portion of people, it's sending the message, like what you were saying, that, you know, you better, you know, stay in your lane, and, you know, keep your eyes, you know, where it's supposed to go, and keep your mouth shut, or else, you know, or we're going to ruin your life.
You could live a very happy life within our rules if you stay in your lane.
But if they choose these people who are generally not people that you are supposed to be feeling bad for, right? It makes it difficult for you to feel bad for them.
That's a good point.
You know, then you are more willing to say, oh, well, it's okay this time because it's them. Because InfoWars, you know, and that's another reason why when the arrest first happened, people didn't even think that it was true that she was arrested. They were like, no, we need to see the documents from the cops, you know, that they actually did arrest her, you know, because of the fact that they tried to discredit InfoWars, which I'm not saying that InfoWars is a credible, you know, organization, but immediately that's what they go to do, is to discredit them, so that way you don't feel bad, and then you don't pay attention to the way that they infringe our civil liberties little by little. Right?
It's like Kamala Harris calling for, you know, kicking Trump off tweet. You know, again, it's that whole, like, at first they came for the communists or whatever, you know.
But I think it does create this atmosphere of fear. So now, like, you're gonna think twice about going to a demonstration or whatever, because now they have this facial recognition technology, you know, gait recognition, GAIT recognition technology, so they can identify who you are. You were at this demonstration. Oh, maybe we'll audit his taxes or something, or we'll do something to like harass them. And most people have, you know, they're not like the Martin Luther King, or they're not like the Julian Assange. Like, they have, you know, they have a job, they have family, and they have all this stuff. They have those responsibilities, and they don't want to risk having even a minor, you know, accusation or a lawsuit that could cause them to lose their job, or make them have to hire an attorney.
Right.
They don't want to risk it, so they're going to think, oh well, maybe I won't go to that demonstration because I'm trying to I'm up for a promotion on my job, and I don't want to screw everything up. I think that's the message it sends out, and people are like, they're afraid, they're intimidated about going out and actually demanding change, and oh yeah, you can vote for the candidate you want or whatever, but that's it.
Right. That's right. And then, of course, once we all get the COVID vaccine and we all have that microchip in us, then.
Well, but this also leads towards, and I believe in China they already have this, is the social credit score, right? So, if
That's
we
right.
are at that point where, you can't really do anything, like they control how much money. I remember this is why I've told you that with UBI, it kind of scares me, because once we become dependent on the government, that the government is the sole delivery of or source of your funds, well, that is a lot of power to wield, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that, what about if I do want to go to a protest and I do want to dissent, or, like I want to expose something that's going on. Well, I mean, I might think twice about that because my funds might get cut off,
Interesting,
from that.
yeah.
And that is something, like I said, that is something that, originally, I think it's something that I don't know if it was already in the works or whatever, but on Black Mirror, have you guys ever seen that show?
I have a couple times.
You gotta watch Black Mirror, man.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. A lot of the episodes, it really, because it's supposed to be like essentially a technocratic dystopia.
Yeah.
And it's really well made, and a lot of the episodes have either come true, or there are certain aspects of it that that it is coming true. And one of the episodes, they did talk about essentially a social credit score, where and in China, the way that they have it implemented is that, like, they want to essentially they'll do like public shamings, where they'll put on a billboard, they'll put, like, if you did something wrong,
Wow.
they'll actually put it on a billboard so that people know, or you won't be able to travel on public transportation. Or,
I thought I saw something. I thought I saw some article or a picture that basically implied that the police could essentially, with the right kind of face mask, visual goggles, whatever, could scan a crowd and it would pick out. It would show, like, people by a color, like what social score they had. Then they could spot the troublemakers. Like, right? Yeah, that's frightening stuff. That's as crazy science fiction as you get, right?
And the U.S. government, they're not far behind.
And
Google and all these fuckers,
that they're
behind all together on
it. They're on the forefront of getting that technology to China. They're doing it. They're working with them on it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
They can identify people who potentially will commit a crime, right? So they'll say, like, you fit the profile. Yeah. So
it's Minority Report. Yeah, you see?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's really crazy when life imitates art that way, but it makes you think that, these people, I guess if you can imagine it, then yes, it can come true, right?
Yeah, that falls into place with I guess I'll do a quick conspiracy theory. Do you remember like a year or two ago, there was a thing on Facebook where they were basically telling people, like, post a picture of yourself now and 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And everyone that has like a technological background was saying, well, they were basically getting you to give them data to train their algorithms for facial recognition so they could automatically age people really efficiently. And I just believe that's true. That's what they did with that.
They are feeding this info to the AI. This is all that they're just giving it more and more information, and people give it away. That's the thing. It's like.
And at this point, they've got all the data they need. They just are working on faster, better algorithms to, more perfectly identify people. And there was all that stuff about, like, taking out the racial biases involved in, because the programmer brings their own racial biases, and so they had a problem actually identifying black people as well as the AI could identify white people and things like that. So
well, I thought that it
yeah.
was more so that, because of the data that they had with facial recognition in particular,
Right.
it was that the database, the information that they had, it was mostly white males. And so then what happened, because they didn't have enough, I guess, discriminatory information for
Yeah.
people of color, then it would see a person of color and it would think, oh, it's definitely this person. So it would generalize more.
But is Facebook isn't like widely used in the African American community? It's not widely. I mean, basically, I'm talking about like Facebook. I mean, Facebook is going to be feeding all their imagery to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You're just talking specifically about like the social media aspect.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was thinking that I'm assuming that Facebook, basically the government, if they don't have a direct tap into Facebook to pull that data anyway.
Well, but the thing is that, so you remember how last week we were talking about like the head of the Homeland Security, how he wanted to direct for the secretary to start to cite a pilot program for these fusion centers, right, to be able to share this information, which I ended up finding out. So these fusion centers, it's NSA hubs where they literally exchange information with all of these state and local police and all these different departments, right? And obviously that's what it was talking about with the protesters, right? But that is essentially all of this information is given to these fusion centers. So really it's our NSA that's behind all of this stuff.
Right, but I'm thinking that they probably get data from all social media.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I got it. That is what you're saying.
Yeah, with the metadata. So not only do they have all pictures I've ever posted of myself and everybody, they have the metadata.
Stouts.
They have the metadata of who I am and who all my contacts are, so they can line them up for facial recognition and identify people.
And you know how Jimmy Dore is always talking about how Bill Binney told him about the double tap and about how they're able to, and I forgot who he was talking to, that they actually told him about like something else. Maybe it was Aaron Mate that was actually talking about this. But just the way that they're able to set up this web, and that's how they're able to, get more and more information, and they really do build like profiles. Like they can pretty much, plan out your day for you before your day has even happened. They can figure out, that's how smart these AIs have gotten already.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, they've been doing different types of personality profiling and stuff like that. That stuff's been going on forever because it makes money, right? It's tied into advertising and everything like that. So it's been getting the resources, and they tie that in with all the technology and the data that's available now that everyone's willingly giving up on social media. And it's a 1984 sci-fi nightmare scenario, really.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You guys definitely need to watch Black Mirror. Definitely recommend it. Recommend. All right. Can I just do my legislative weekend review?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I do want to say, it's still a week away from basically giving. August 30th is Moving for a People's Party convention. I think people ought to watch that. It's going to have Nina Turner, Dr. Cornel West, Jimmy Dore is going to be on it. Marianne Williamson, and they got more people that are going to line up. So that's going to be really.
That's fantastic.
If you were so bored during the DNC and realized what a ridiculous event that was, this is going to be really excellent.
Maybe we could spend a lot of time on that. More time on it next.
Yeah, I'll say a real quick interesting wrinkle that came out of that is that on Twitter they were asking Tulsi if she can. If she could attend and speak, but she is actually in Alaska right now, like doing her 2-week National Guard tour. It's something like helping with the infrastructure in some like poor Alaskan tribal community or something like that, right? Just like what you might expect. But she doesn't get back from that tour until a couple of days after the convention. But I'm hoping that she must get time off and she must be able to videotape, take a little message and send it to. I just want that so bad.
I just don't know that she's got the guts to do it, man.
She doesn't have the guts. She's all guts. What are you talking about?
Dude, come on. You know that I've told you she's disappointed me so bad.
Oh,
recently,
I've had disappointments, yeah. But then again, recently, people were recently saying, what has she done lately? I'm saying, winter of the month, she did that legislation to keep track of sanctions and the harm sanctions are causing. She's still cranking out important legislation.
Right. No, that I understand. But she became a hermit crab, like
yes. Well, COVID.
She took her ball and went home. Like that.
She was completely focused on COVID in Hawaii. But I'm not saying what you're saying. That I didn't feel the same. I did too. I'm saying you should stay on the national stage at some level and keep your hand in there.
Oh yeah, for sure. But
again,
but her going and speaking on essentially like a new party, because I'm not supposed to call it a third party.
Yeah.
Talking on a different party's platform, I think that that would send a signal. Yeah, and I don't know that she's ready to, because then that would be this whole big thing of, oh my God, Tulsi Gabbard, and she's not really trying to get back into those type of politics. You know what I'm saying?
Despite the historic
on her stuff.
Despite the historic snub of not having a person that won delegates speaking at the DNC convention.
I know, which when I saw that she answered to somebody that she said like, oh yes, indeed, it reminded me, like, she has her like trollish moments.
Yeah, that's right. She does.
I felt like that was definitely her trolling the DNC, like, yeah, no, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, it's actually true. I did not hear anything from them. All right. Our legislation.
Okay. All right. So as we know, our Congress has abandoned us. Yes, they have, the House came back for that emergency legislation for the post office, but it's like none of these things, it's not even going to pass. Nothing's going to happen because it has to go to the Senate, and they don't come back until September 8th. Right. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like, when is this even going to matter? And they're really only doing it for the election. So that's why I didn't really want to focus on that. And so I figured that what we would do is that we would focus more on a local level, right? And we started off talking about local politics, right? Yep. And I thought that, this is not, the newest information, but I did think this was important. So as you can see, and this is from Progressive Massachusetts. And so it says, fights for housing justice and immigration justice. Issues Committee, Progressive Massachusetts, July 29, 2020. On Monday, the House voted on key housing amendments to its economic development bill. So apparently, Charlie Baker, he introduced this economic development bill that is supposed to be, I don't know if it's like just an emergency type of bill that's going on now, but it is supposed to address, like, it's a pretty huge bill, but it addresses like so many different things. And so obviously I can't cover that now, but so it says state reps overwhelmingly ignored housing justice activists voting against allowing municipalities to impose real estate transfer fees to combat speculation and raise money for affordable housing, against allowing municipalities to pass rent stabilizing regulations, and against making it easier for municipalities to pass inclusionary zoning ordinances, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't know if it's just because it came from Charlie Baker, and like a lot of these directives, it came from Charlie Baker, and it's a Republican-led thing. I don't know if maybe that's what it is, but these type of things just make a lot of sense to me, that they would be good for the community.
But are we talking about they voted against one gigantic bill that had?
Nope. And I'm going to go through that. And okay. There's like 3 different amendments that they voted no on, but overwhelmingly they voted against all these measures.
Okay.
And so it says some of these state reps embarrassingly voted against the text of bills they co-sponsored earlier in the session, which that's what I don't know what happened here, where obviously they were on board at one point, and then now all of a sudden they've just dropped it.
They pulled the Kamala.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that it's one of those things where they thought, well, I mean, the majority is going to go this way, so why am I going to like waste my vote type of thing, you know, which
Mm,
I don't need you to be doing that, you know, and on a
right.
state level, that is not acceptable, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it says here, was your representative one of those who stood up for housing justice? And that's another page that I'm going to open up after this. But I did want to touch upon this first. And so it says, the Senate will be taking up its version of an economic development bill tomorrow. So that, but you know, again, this was July 29th. So that means that there is another opportunity to fight for housing justice and immigration justice. And so there were 4 amendments that are on here. Um, and I recommend for anybody watching this and that's in Massachusetts to go on this website because it's really accessible, for you to be able to get the information and to communicate with the people that you need to communicate with, your representatives.
Hmm.
And so the first one was this number 57, which is compromise local option transfer fee on high cost home sales to support low and middle income housing, which enables municipalities to impose a real estate transfer fee on sales above $1 million with money going to affordable housing. That's what I'm saying. Like, doesn't that make sense? Like, how are
Mm.
you going to tell me that if the housing sale is above $1 million, you can't put a real estate transfer fee on that? And then those funds would actually go to, for affordable housing? How does that not make sense?
Yeah, I know it. When you're talking above $1 million, like,
Yeah,
if, I
I
mean,
mean, I understand
if
not
the
on all the
percentage,
housing.
yeah, if the percentage is, a reasonable amount, um, how is that not just a reasonable thing to do?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And
Well, they
then,
would say that some neighborhoods are being discriminated against because, like, you look at
yeah,
I was looking at like Savin Hill, right? Uh, I just saw a house on there, that was for sale for like 1.2 million, and it's like, it's just like a house, but that's like in that neighborhood, that's what you pay for a house, right?
yeah,
Whereas like in another part of the state, obviously the same house would sell for 300,000 or whatever. Um, so I, I I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm
yeah.
sure that the argument is that, well, it will discriminate against certain areas because the prices are higher there because of increased demand. So it's not fair to do that. I mean, I'm
Mm.
not saying I don't support that, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying that's what they're going to argue.
Yeah, for sure. And then number 96, City of Boston Inclusionary Development Policy and Linkage Fees, which incorporates Boston's inclusionary development policy, requires affordable units within new residential projects, which, especially in Boston, I feel like that's very much needed, right? Because you have a lot of these high rises that are being built that are just, they're built for people who can pay millions of dollars
Yeah.
for for an apartment or whatever, and then it just, everybody that lives there ends up being kicked out of their neighborhoods, or they can't afford to live in the cities that they work in, which that incurs extra costs for people who can't afford these costs to begin with, right?
Mm.
And linkage fees, which requires payments from large commercial developments to fund affordable housing and job training into Boston's zoning code, and allows for future rate adjustments. I do know that this is something that, I don't know if maybe specifically this amendment, but something similar to this, that Marty Walsh is actually very supportive of a lot of these initiatives.
I just say real quick, when I was at the that Suffolk Downs protest for Moving for People's Party, and there were a lot of Bernie from Worcester people there. Was also a big group of folks who were involved in protesting gentrification, because Suffolk Downs is going to have this big 10,000 unit housing development going there without adequate affordable housing stayaways, and these poor folks are sitting there fighting to be able to continue exactly everything you're talking about, continue to live in the neighborhood they grew up in, basically. Yeah, so that was great to see them out fighting, trying to get the delegates to pay attention to them.
I think all this stuff is great, but the real problem is you don't have progressive taxation, progressive income taxation, progressive wealth taxation, because if you had that, then there'd be a lot less demand for these super high-end places, and people would be able to keep more of their money who are lower on the economic ladder. So I think these are all fine and good, but like the whole problem is that you have this extremely regressive taxation system in general that causes a lot of these problems.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Well, and
that's a
not just that,
huge,
but
huge part.
a lot of the investors in a lot of these high rises and like really expensive condo buildings, they're people that aren't even going to live here. They just buy out like floors. They live in Russia or in China or in a lot of these other countries, and they buy up a lot of this real estate, and then it just builds up the price of everything. But no one's even living in these places, which
Right.
makes it even more of a crime.
Well, they have so much cash, they don't want to buy up treasuries. So like in China and Russia, they have so much cash, they're buying up these, high-end real estate locations just to kind of as investments. And in Boston, I mean, you have the whatever that high rise in Boston. I mean, it's basically sitting empty because it's all foreign investors who have bought the units there.
And meanwhile, you have a rising number of homeless people, or people that are going to be evicted from their homes. And it's like, why are you doing this?
Oh yeah. And also probably just the amount of commercial real estate that's sitting open. I got the word from my company that we don't go back until June of 2021.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that does hurt, those landlords. But
oh yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
when you're that massive, I mean, obviously, if you lose all of your buildings, then that's one thing. But all right. And so number 175, so tenant right to counsel pilot, which I thought this was really cool, which establishes a right to counsel pilot program to provide full legal representation to eligible individuals vulnerable to evictions. Because I feel like that's something that when you are going through an eviction, the majority of the time you don't know the right steps to take. And a lot of the times you make the wrong step and that can cost you your home. It can cause you to end up losing. And coming from someone who I actually was evicted from somewhere, so I understand the fear of getting that notice on your door and not knowing what the right thing to do, who the right person to talk to is. So I thought that is something really great.
Well, the statistics on evictions, I believe, it's very clear. Like if you have an attorney, if you have representation, your chances of being evicted are much, much lower than if you don't have any, if you're just doing it yourself. So basically it's like, I mean, it's totally reversed. Like your chance of being evicted are like whatever, 90% if you don't have representation, and it's like 7% if you do. So it's like very skewed. So obviously providing representation to people would make a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, there's this link here that you can click on, and it will, that way you can communicate to your senators and tell them that you want to support these things. And then the last one is number 249. So supporting affordable housing with a local option for a fee to be applied to certain real estate transactions, which enables cities and towns to impose transfer fees on real estate sales with appropriate exemptions, ergo for low and middle income homeowners. So you see, I mean, there are measures you can put.
What's the difference between that one and the one for like $1 million? It's essentially sales fees that would support low-income housing, right?
Yeah. So essentially, I think it's the same goal, but I think it's that one is for municipalities and the other one is for cities and towns.
There we go. Okay.
And I'm sure that they introduce a lot of these different measures that may sound the same, but they're just like tweaking little by little. Because they're hoping to get more in, obviously, if it's just like one thing that they need to change or whatever, then it becomes better. So, well, because I'm looking at the time and I know that Steve's got to go, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I will put the link in the description so that you can click on here and you can see. It's like I said, it's the 3 measures that I brought up earlier. That you can look on here and you can see your representatives how they voted on these 3 measures.
Hey, can you scroll up again?
Yeah.
That name, no, below. Sorry, down below, right there.
This one?
Yeah, I like the fact that there's somebody on there whose name is Mom.
Where? Oh, Mom.
Who's Mom? I shouldn't. It's probably their
great.
name. Yeah.
That's
But anyways,
funny.
I thought
That's
that was
funny.
interesting. Okay, guys, I gotta go. We have to go pick up a kitty cat at the shelter. So
Cool. All right.
yeah, that's a wrap.
All right.
All right. Well,
All right,
thanks
guys.
everybody.
Very good, guys.
Peace
See you
out.
Thanks a
next
lot.
week.
Peace
Take
out.
care. Bye-bye.